Good evening, this is Bryce Hall, and this is my screencast of my research paper on ADHD and students with ADHD in the classroom. I'm going to start by reading the overview to give you a quick idea and summary. So here we go. ADD and ADHD, known as attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, has quickly risen to become the largest children's diagnosis in history. Though many have questioned the credibility of the diagnosis, there have been recent discoveries of brain structure and function being different for those with ADD or ADHD than those without. These structural and functional differences in the brain are directly related to the control centers for tasking, attention, self-control, aggressiveness, and many other strong characteristics exhibited by students with ADD or ADHD. Furthermore, these behaviors in a classroom range from mild disturbances to possible complete upheavals in a classroom setting, thus meaning it is of utmost importance that educators know what behaviors to expect and how to minimize their occurrences. A recurring discussion regarding the validity of the ADHD diagnosis is being able to distinguish what we would call normal, age-appropriate behaviors in children and young adults from attention deficit hyperactivity tendencies. The discrepancies are most easily differentiated outside of the comfort zones and observed by at least 3 adults to avoid biases when possible. Teachers and educators can implement various tactics and techniques ranging from the way an assignment is formatted to summarizing the plan for the day. It is important to switch between mental and physical activity regularly to allow opportunity for hyperactivity to be worked out in an appropriate manner. Conclusively, students with ADD or ADHD require more intentional instruction to guide them to perform at their highest potential. So that just gives you a quick summary and idea of what I went over. I started out my research paper by explaining what attention deficit disorder or attention hyperactivity disorder is. Now the term is generally interchangeable when it comes to the professionals and doctors. I actually personally grew up and still struggle with ADHD. I took medication for most of my childhood, most of my time throughout school, and that did help a lot, but that in itself was not enough. I mentioned in my paper that my junior and senior year in high school, my therapist at the time actually finally advocated for me to get an IEP, and that allowed me to take breaks in the classroom when I was becoming too fidgety and anxious and go take a lap around the school, and that would help me recenter and get focused. It also gave me extended time on testing and also the ability to take a test in a private room. Those were very beneficial, and the results of my tests and education were benefited greatly. So I start out by explaining what it is, and one of the issues is that talk about here, although ADHD stemmed as a scapegoat for America's underachieving education during the arms race, it has since been exposed as being associated with structural and functional abnormalities in the brain. So when ADHD was first being discovered and studied, there was not a lot of proof or research that it even really existed. They didn't know where it came from. It was just diagnosed from the symptoms that were observed in the student's behavior. Now they've done tests and research shows that there are actual abnormalities in the brain. For example, when I was in the United States Marine Corps, I had to see a therapist because some things were coming up, and they put me back on medication and knew that I was diagnosed with ADHD. So they actually had me undergo a study that I talk about in here when I was in the Marine Corps, where they had me take these weird tests on the computer that had focused on reading and memorization and math and different random topics. And they hooked me up to some monitors to monitor my brain waves and also my oxygen levels. And then they did the same test again, but altered slightly, and hooked me up to an forced oxygen machine to increase my oxygen that was getting to my brain. Now, at the time, I didn't personally notice a whole lot of difference from one to the other, but I was contacted later, and apparently those doctors doing that research did come up with some good results that did show proof that it made a difference. And apparently ADHD students or people with ADHD have a lack of oxygen in their frontal lobe compared to quote-unquote normal students. So talk a little bit about that, and then go on to the focus in the classroom. When I was younger, and this is just my own story here, and which I didn't talk about too much, but more in a general term with some of the sources that I cited. But I got in a lot of trouble from just talking, and I couldn't sit still, and fidgeting, and those are all common symptoms of ADHD. And so we focus on that, and then go on to talk about some of the scaffolding and differentiating that teachers can do to help students with ADHD so that they can perform at their highest level. So I like this paper and doing this research. It was hit very close to home with me, obviously, and I find it fascinating. One of the great books that I used as a resource was Paul Cooper's book, Educating Children with ADHD, a Teacher's Manual. I would recommend all of you to actually check it out. It was very good. And then I used some scientific articles and some websites to pull some information. And yeah, it was a great experience. So thank you. Hope you enjoy the paper. And here's my works cited down here.